Over the years, Wingstop has become almost inseparable from Rick Ross, especially after he reopened and expanded multiple locations across the Mid-South. But according to a new report from the U.S. Department of Labor, the Grammy-winning rapper may have been cooking up more than just hit records. The report claims Ross's company, Boss Wings Enterprises, broke labor laws at least 5 Wingstop locations in Mississippi. While Rick Ross was living large in a 109-room mansion, flexing Rolls-Royces and private jets online, teenagers working at his Wingstop restaurants were allegedly clocking illegal hours and earning less than minimum wage. Today, we're unpacking how one of hip-hop's biggest moguls got caught running what federal investigators labeled an illegal operation, and how he tried to finesse his way out when the Department of Labor showed up. Before we get into it, let's quickly talk about wage theft. According to the Labor Department, these paychecks...
Since these niggas count my pockets, I'm gonna let them know my next move. My next move finna be Thriller in Manila 3. Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield 3. Once Tyson knock out Jake Paul, I'ma get Tyson and Holyfield a fight in my front yard. I'm gonna put a ring right there. And it's gonna go down in my front yard. I want the judges to be Snoop Dogg, Kevin Hart, academics. You hear me? The ring gonna be right there at the promised land. Thriller in Manila, the biggest.
Check deductions caused employees' average hourly pay to dip below $7.25, the federal minimum wage. Wage theft happens when workers aren't paid what the law requires, whether that's being shorted on minimum wage, denied overtime, or hit with illegal deductions. Most people think wage theft only happens in shady back alley businesses or overseas sweatshops. But in this case, we're talking about what Rick Ross and his family's company allegedly did right here in America, systematically underpaying workers, docking paychecks illegally, and violating child labor laws, all while operating legit franchise restaurants. The company also broke child labor rules by allowing a 15-year-old employee to work past 10 p.m. multiple times in June 2021. And here's the crazy part. This wasn't some mom-and-pop setup. This was a multi-location operation pulling in millions. So today, we're exposing the entire Rick Ross Wingstop scandal, from how he started building his franchise empire in 2011 to the 2022 federal investigation that uncovered illegal wage practices, to the $114,427 settlement his company had to pay. We'll break down exactly how workers were getting played, how minors were overworked in violation of federal law, and how Ross tried to spin the narrative once everything started falling apart. Trust me, this situation is way messier than most people realize. Alright, let's rewind and talk about how Rick Ross even got here. William Leonard Roberts II, known to the world as Rick Ross, exploded onto the scene in 2006 with his debut single, Hustling. That song was everywhere. The hook was simple, addictive, and sparked a full-on bidding war between major labels. He ultimately signed with Def Jam, and his debut album, Port of Miami, dropped later that year, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200. From day one, Ross branded himself as the boss. Not just a rapper, but a mogul in the making. His image was built around power moves, being a CEO, a kingpin, someone running empires. He wasn't just rapping about drugs, he was talking about investments, ownership, and generational wealth. And to be fair, he backed it up. Over the next few years, Ross dropped multiple platinum albums and launched Maybach Music Group in 2009, signing artists like Meek Mill, Whale, and French Montana. MMG became one of the most successful labels in hip-hop, with Ross at the center, executive producing, mentoring artists, and growing a legitimate music empire. But Ross was always clear, music was only one lane. In interviews, he constantly preached ownership, diversification, and building businesses that could survive long after rap. That message resonated deeply in hip-hop culture, where making it out and staying wealthy is the ultimate goal. Ross seemed to get that better than most. By the early 2010s, Ross was making serious moves outside music. He bought the former Evander Holyfield estate in Georgia, a massive 109-room mansion on 235 acres with a bowling alley, movie theater, and indoor pool. The purchase alone cost $5.8 million, not including the millions spent on renovations. He invested in real estate, luxury car washes, and built a portfolio far beyond entertainment.
But the business move that became his signature? Wingstop. And that's where this story takes a dark turn. Around 2011, Ross started investing heavily in Wingstop franchises. For those unfamiliar, Wingstop Corporate owns the brand, recipes, and marketing, but individual franchise owners run the restaurants day to day. They pay fees to corporate, but control operations and keep most of the profits. For Ross, it was the perfect play. A proven brand, national recognition, and steady cash flow without starting from scratch. And he didn't just dabble. Over about a decade, Ross reportedly owned between 25 and 30 Wingstop locations, mostly concentrated in the Southeast. That's not a side hustle, that's a serious business empire. Let's talk numbers. The average Wingstop location pulls in $1 to $1.5 million a year. Even on the low end, 25 locations could generate $25 to $37.5 million annually. That's gross revenue, not profit, but still, that's major money. Ross proudly made Wingstop part of his image. He talked about it in interviews, flexed it on social media, even referenced it in his music. He sold the story of being a rapper who created jobs and invested in communities. Fans respected it. Other artists studied it. Rick Ross became the blueprint for the rapper-turned-businessman. But here's where things get sticky. Several Mississippi Wingstop locations were owned through Boss Wings Enterprises, LLC, a family-run company where Ross's sister, Tawanda Roberts, was listed as a principal. These stores were independent franchises, meaning Wingstop Corporate wasn't in charge of daily operations. Boss Wings Enterprises was. They hired workers, set schedules, ran payroll, and that's where everything went left. Fast forward to 2022, the Department of Labor launched an investigation into these Mississippi locations, and what they found was wild. This wasn't about minor mistakes or bookkeeping errors. Investigators uncovered systematic wage theft and illegal labor practices across multiple locations. We're talking repeated, deliberate violations affecting dozens of workers over years. Here's how it went down. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, already painfully low. Full-time, that's about $15,080 a year before taxes. But Boss Wings Enterprises allegedly found a way to pay workers even less. The trick? Illegal paycheck deductions. Employees were charged for uniforms, training, background checks, and even cash register shortages. Sounds normal to some, but legally it's not. Under federal law, if these deductions drop a worker's pay below minimum wage, it's illegal, no exceptions. Example, a worker earns $7.25 an hour for 40 hours, $290 gross. Then deductions hit. $30 for uniforms, $20 for a background check, $15 for training, $25 for a register shortage. That's $90 gone. Now they're taking home $200. That's $5 an hour, $2.25 below minimum wage, flat out illegal. And this wasn't a one-off. Investigators found this practice was widespread and ongoing for years. What makes it even worse is the contrast. While workers struggled to survive on less than minimum wage, Rick Ross was flaunting a billionaire-style lifestyle. Luxury cars, private jets, custom jewelry, and that massive mansion. The gap is jarring. These workers were in hot kitchens, dealing with customers, grinding long hours, while the boss lived lavishly off their labor. That's not boss behavior, that's exploitation. The Fair Labor Standards Act has been law since 1938. It clearly bans deductions that push pay below minimum wage. Boss Wings Enterprises allegedly ignored that, betting workers wouldn't complain, and for a long time they were right. Wage theft is common in fast food because workers are often young, new to the workforce, and unaware of their rights. Filing complaints is intimidating, and enforcement resources are limited. Boss Wings Enterprises allegedly took advantage of that reality until the feds finally stepped in. Come of it. They really thought they could quietly pocket the extra cash from those illegal deductions and nobody would clock it. But someone did. Whether it was a current employee, a former worker, or someone on the inside who knew exactly what was happening, a complaint was filed. Boss Wings Enterprises got reported to the Department of Labor. And once the DOL stepped in, the dominoes started falling fast. Investigators uncovered a pattern of violations that was way too consistent to ignore. The fact that this went on for years before anyone stepped in tells you everything about how Boss Wings Enterprises was moving. These weren't innocent slip-ups or bookkeeping errors. This was deliberate. Workers were being exploited, and the company was betting they'd never get caught. And if systematic wage theft wasn't bad enough, the investigation also exposed child labor violations. This is where the story gets even darker. Federal child labor laws exist for one reason: to protect minors from being taken advantage of. These rules are especially strict for 14 and 15-year-olds, who are legally considered extra vulnerable. The whole point is to make sure kids have time for school, homework, rest, and, wild concept, actually being kids. Here's what the law says. Teens aged 14 and 15 can work, but only under strict limits. No more than 3 hours on a school day, 18 hours during a school week, 8 hours on a non-school day, or 40 hours in a non-school week. They can't work before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m. except during summer break, from June 1 to Labor Day, when they're allowed to work until 9 p.m. These rules aren't random. Teenagers need time for school and proper rest. Overworking them can mess with their grades, their mental health, and their overall development. The law recognizes the power imbalance between young workers and employers and puts guardrails in place to stop exploitation. But Boss Wings Enterprises didn't seem to care about any of that. The DOL found record-keeping violations, meaning the company wasn't properly tracking the hours minors were working. That alone is a major red flag. Accurate records are legally required specifically to prevent this kind of abuse. And it didn't stop there. Investigators confirmed at least one case where a 15-year-old employee worked past the federally allowed hours. Let that sink in. A 15-year-old, still very much a child, was being worked illegally, likely their first job, just trying to earn some money, and their employer put them in violation of federal law. At that age, you're juggling high school, homework, maybe sports or clubs, and trying to get enough sleep. Boss Wings Enterprises took that time away. And here's the ugly truth about employing teenagers. The power imbalance is massive. A 15-year-old doesn't know labor laws. They don't know what's legal or illegal. They do what their manager tells them because they need the money and don't want to get fired. That dynamic makes it incredibly easy for employers to cross the line, and that's exactly what happened here. The fact that the company wasn't even keeping proper records of minors' hours strongly suggests they knew they were in the wrong. If you're following the law, you document everything. If you're breaking it, things tend to go missing. After wrapping up the investigation, the Department of Labor took action, and while the dollar amounts might not sound massive compared to the millions these locations were pulling in, the exposure was brutal. The DOL recovered $51,674 in back wages and liquidated damages for underpaid workers. Here's what that means. Back wages are the money workers should have been paid in the first place, the gap between what they earned and what they were legally owed. Liquidated damages match that amount dollar for dollar. It's a penalty meant to punish the employer and compensate workers for the delay. So roughly $25,837 was stolen wages, and another $25,837 was added as punishment. On top of that, the DOL slapped Boss Wings Enterprises with $62,753 in civil penalties, separate fines paid to the government to deter future violations.
All in, the company had to cough up about $114,427 to settle the case. Now let's be real. For a multi-location franchise pulling in millions every year, $114K isn't exactly devastating. It's basically a slap on the wrist. And that's one of the most frustrating things about wage theft cases. The penalties often aren't strong enough to scare big operators. If you profit for years and only pay a relatively small fine when caught, some companies see it as a calculated risk. But here's where this case really hit: public exposure. The Department of Labor doesn't handle these quietly. They issue press releases, they name names, and when the business is tied to a famous rapper, the story spreads fast. Rick Ross's Wingstop scandal went national. Hip-hop blogs, entertainment outlets, business media, Facebook feeds, everyone was talking.
For someone who built his brand around being a boss and a savvy businessman, that kind of headline hurts bad. So Ross had to respond, and what we got was a textbook PR move. He took to social media, acknowledged the violations, and framed it as, when you run a business, mistakes happen. He said he was taking accountability and promised it wouldn't happen again. Let's unpack that. Calling this a mistake is strategic. Mistakes sound accidental, unintentional, but paying workers below minimum wage for years, making illegal deductions, overworking a 15-year-old? None of that happens by accident. This was a pattern, not a typo. Labeling it a mistake minimizes the damage and softens the narrative. Then there's the taking accountability line, a PR favorite. It sounds responsible, but what did that actually mean here? Ross didn't personally apologize to the workers. He didn't acknowledge the harm done to underpaid employees or overworked teens. He didn't explain who made the decisions or how the system failed. It was accountability in name only. Real accountability would have meant transparency, specifics, and direct amends. None of that happened. He also promised it wouldn't happen again without explaining how. No details, no systems, no oversight plan. Without specifics, that promise is empty. What Ross was really doing was damage control. Admit just enough, move fast, and try to protect the brand. And honestly, it worked for some people. Ross has a loyal fan base, and plenty of fans gave him the benefit of the doubt. Some even argued he wasn't involved in day-to-day operations. But that defense doesn't hold up. Ownership comes with responsibility. You can't profit off a business, promote it as part of your image, and then plead ignorance when things go wrong. Ross was happy to take credit when Wingstop symbolized his success, but when the exploitation came to light, suddenly it was just mistakes. The workers don't get to just move on. They lost money meant for rent, food, and basic survival. The teenagers lost time they'll never get back. An Instagram post doesn't erase that. Wingstop Corporate also had to respond. They emphasized that the locations were independently owned and operated franchises, and that corporate wasn't aware of the violations during the investigation. Legally, that's accurate. Franchisees handle hiring, scheduling, and payroll. But reputationally, that's a different story. When a high-profile franchise owner like Rick Ross gets caught violating federal labor laws, it still reflects on the brand, and that stain doesn't disappear easily. Wingstop made it very clear they wanted space from this mess. Their response was carefully worded to separate the corporate brand from the scandal, basically saying this is a Rick Ross franchise problem, not a Wingstop problem. And from a pure business standpoint, that makes sense. They're protecting their image, calming customers, and reassuring other franchise owners that this isn't how Wingstop supposedly operates. But let's be honest, it also opens up some uncomfortable questions about the franchise model itself. If a franchise owner can break labor laws for years without corporate knowing, what does that really say about oversight and accountability? Most franchise agreements require owners to follow all labor laws. Corporate usually has the right to inspect locations, review records, and even pull the plug if rules are broken. So while corporate Wingstop may not be running daily operations, they do have tools to monitor what's going on. The real question is whether those tools were actually being used or quietly ignored as long as the franchise fees kept rolling in. I'm not saying corporate Wingstop knew and looked the other way, but I am saying the franchise system makes it very easy for corporate to profit while maintaining plausible deniability when things go wrong. Now, let's zoom out, because this story isn't just about Rick Ross. It's about a much bigger issue in America: wage theft. Wage theft is one of the most common forms of theft in the country, yet it barely gets any attention. According to the Economic Policy Institute, workers lose billions of dollars every year to wage theft, more than what's stolen through robberies, burglaries, larcenies, and car thefts combined. Let that sink in. More money is stolen from workers' paychecks than from all property crimes put together. So why don't we hear about it the same way we hear about a bank robbery? Because the victims are usually low-wage workers, immigrants, young people, and people of color, the folks with the least power and the fewest resources to fight back.
The restaurant industry is one of the worst offenders. Fast food workers in particular deal with all kinds of violations: getting paid below minimum wage, unpaid hours, missing overtime, illegal deductions, and being forced to work off the clock. Why is this so common? Simple. It's a low-wage industry with high turnover. Workers don't stay long enough to notice patterns or feel safe speaking up. Many are young and don't know their rights, and there's a huge power imbalance. Complain and you risk losing your job or your hours. And when wealthy, high-profile owners like Rick Ross are involved, it sends a dangerous message. It normalizes exploitation. It tells people that workers at the bottom don't matter, and that those at the top can do whatever they want as long as they don't get caught. Rick Ross built his brand on being a boss, a hustler, a mogul. But what kind of boss underpays workers? What kind of hustler profits off teenagers being overworked? That's not boss behavior, that's scamming. So why does this scandal matter? First, because the workers deserve justice. Wage theft isn't victimless. When you're making $7.25 an hour or less, every dollar matters. That money goes to rent, food, gas, utilities. When an employer steals from your paycheck, that can mean skipped meals or unpaid bills. For the teenagers who are overworked, the damage looks different but hits just as hard. Time spent working illegal hours is time stolen from school, sleep, and childhood. That can affect grades, health, and long-term development. Second, this matters because Rick Ross has influence. Millions of fans see him as a blueprint for success. When someone with that platform cuts corners and exploits workers, it sends the worst possible message, that profit matters more than people. Third, this fits into a bigger pattern of celebrity business scandals. We've seen this play out before. Famous names launching businesses, then mistreating workers behind the scenes. Unpaid labor, unsafe conditions, wage theft. Fame doesn't equal ethics. And finally, this matters because wage theft is systemic. The more it's exposed, the harder it becomes to hide. Every case that goes public sends a warning that exploitation isn't invisible anymore. So what happened after the Department of Labor stepped in and Ross made his statement? Boss Wings Enterprises paid the $114,427 settlement, and the Mississippi Wingstop locations stayed open. Rick Ross is still involved in Wingstop, and his franchise portfolio is still massive. The big question is, did anything really change? Are workers being treated better, or is the company just more careful now? Without ongoing oversight, it's hard to know. Once a case is settled, the Department of Labor usually moves on unless new complaints pop up. That means enforcement largely relies on the same company that broke the law in the first place. From Ross's perspective, this is probably over. Statement posted, money paid, brand mostly intact. Music and business continue. But for the workers, the impact lingers. Back pay helps, but it doesn't erase years of financial stress. And the teenagers can't get back the time they lost. So, let's wrap this up. Rick Ross built a multi-million-dollar Wingstop empire, and in the process, his family's company broke federal labor laws. Workers were paid below minimum wage through illegal deductions. Minors were overworked. This went on for years while Ross lived lavishly and marketed himself as a business success. When the Fed stepped in, the company paid just over $114,000. Ross called it mistakes and claimed accountability, but the response felt more like brand protection than real remorse. At the core of this, greed, cutting labor costs by exploiting vulnerable workers. They thought they'd get away with it, and for a while, they did.
In my opinion, the penalties weren't nearly harsh enough. For a business pulling in millions, that fine is pocket change, and Ross's response didn't truly address the harm done. A real boss protects their workers. A real boss doesn't steal wages or overwork kids. What happened here wasn't boss behavior, it was exploitation. That's the full breakdown of Rick Ross's Wingstop scandal. Let me know what you think. Were the penalties enough, or should there have been real consequences? Drop your thoughts below. And if there's another celebrity business scandal you want unpacked, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.